You are not your mind. You are the silence amidst a storm of thoughts. Have you ever stopped to listen to the voice that speaks in your head? This voice that constantly comments, judges, plans, and worries? This voice is so present and insistent that many of us believe it is who we are. But is that really true? Most people spend their entire lives identified with this voice. It's as if we are constantly accompanied by an internal narrator, a commentator that never shuts up. Imagine reading a book while someone beside you narrates every word, describes every feeling, and makes endless observations. Exhausting, right? But that's exactly what happens in our minds. This identification with the inner voice profoundly shapes our perception of ourselves and the world around us. When we believe we are this voice, we start seeing the world through its eyes, which can limit our life experience in various ways. Let's think of a practical example. Imagine you are about to give an important presentation. The voice in your head starts saying, "What if I make a mistake? What if they don't like it? I'm not good enough for this." This voice creates a scenario of fear and anxiety that can paralyze you. And the curious thing, this voice is not predicting the future. It is merely speculating, based on fears and past experiences. The impact of this identification is immense. It not only creates limitations, but also builds a distorted image of who we really are. Instead of seeing ourselves as complete and capable beings, we see ourselves as reflections of our thoughts, many of which are negative and self-critical. This is the first major barrier we need to overcome to discover our true self. Recognizing that the inner voice is not who we really are is the first step to mental and emotional freedom. It is a challenge, of course, but it is also a gateway to a new way of living. Recognizing the inner voice is the first step. Let's observe how it influences our feelings and actions. And, more importantly, let's start questioning this identification. Does this voice really define me? Have you ever noticed how our mind never seems to shut off? The incessant flow of thoughts is something we all experience. This phenomenon is what we call compulsive thinking. But what does that really mean? Compulsive thinking is that state in which our mind is constantly creating thoughts, one after the other, without stopping. It's like being trapped in a continuous stream of ideas, worries, memories, and plans. Now, imagine being trapped in a room full of people talking at the same time, each one trying to catch your attention. Chaotic, right? That's our mind when we are immersed in this compulsive cycle. But what is the impact of this on our life? Firstly, this constant flow of thoughts prevents us from connecting with our true inner self. We are so busy listening to our mind that we can't hear our own essence. True wisdom, intuition, and deep knowledge of who we are become obscured by this incessant mental noise. Moreover, compulsive thinking is closely linked to fear and suffering. Our mind tends to ruminate on past problems and future anxieties. This keeps us trapped in a constant state of worry and stress, affecting our mental and emotional health. The fear of what might happen, the guilt for what has already happened, all keep us in a cycle of suffering that seems endless. Think about a typical day. How often do you find yourself lost in thoughts about something that went wrong in the past or something you fear might happen in the future? These thoughts not only drain our energy, but also keep us away from the present moment where life truly happens. Let's consider an example. Imagine a person who constantly worries about work. She is always thinking about deadlines, how her boss sees her, and possible mistakes she might make. These thoughts not only create a state of continuous anxiety, but also prevent her from focusing on present tasks. Instead of being fully engaged in what she is doing, she is always somewhere else, mentally speaking. So, how can we deal with this compulsive thinking? The first step is to recognize that it exists. We need to become aware of our own mental pattern. When we realize we are trapped in a cycle of thoughts, we can start to take a step back and observe these thoughts from a different perspective. Observing our thoughts without getting involved with them is a big challenge. But it is the first step to freeing our mind from this compulsive cycle. Have you ever thought of the mind as a tool? Just like any tool, the mind can be incredibly useful if used correctly. But what happens when we don't use it properly? Imagine the mind is like a sharp knife. When used correctly, a knife can be a fantastic instrument, cutting with precision and efficiency. But if we don't know how to use it, we can end up cutting ourselves or damaging what we are trying to cut. The same goes for the mind. When we use the mind correctly, it can help us solve problems, create brilliant ideas, plan for the future, and learn new things. However, many of us are not taught to use our mind effectively. Instead, we let the mind use us. This happens when we get stuck in negative or compulsive thinking patterns, as mentioned earlier. Let's make an interesting comparison. Think of cell division in the human body. Normally, cells divide in an orderly manner, allowing for growth and repair of the body. But when this division becomes uncontrolled, a tumor arises. Similarly, the mind, when out of control, can create mental tumors, destructive thoughts and patterns that affect our mental and emotional health. The improper use of the mind can lead to a series of problems. Anxiety, depression, and stress are just a few examples of how mental mismanagement can manifest. Our mind can become a prison, keeping us hostage to negative and self-critical thoughts. On the other hand, when we learn to use our mind consciously, we can transform it into a powerful ally. This requires practice and attention. One of the first steps is to learn to be present, to focus our attention on the here and now, instead of allowing the mind to wander uncontrollably through the past or future. Think of someone working on a creative project. If this person focuses fully on the present moment, without letting thoughts of self-criticism or worry interfere, she can access a deeper level of creativity and productivity. The mind then becomes a tool that facilitates creation rather than an obstacle. Therefore, using the mind correctly means learning to tame this incessant flow of thoughts and consciously directing our attention. It's turning the mind into a useful tool instead of a source of suffering. Next time you notice your mind wandering, try bringing it back to the present. Focus on what you are doing now. Feel the difference it makes. The primary cause of unhappiness is never the situation, but your thoughts about it. The mind is an incredible tool, but what happens when we completely identify with it? When we see ourselves as our thoughts, we end up suffering from what many call the disease of identification with the mind. But what exactly does that mean? Let's imagine the mind is like a computer. It's a powerful machine capable of processing an enormous amount of information. However, if we start believing that we are this computer, we lose sight of who we really are. Similarly, when we completely identify with the mind, we allow it to control us instead of us controlling it. This disease of identification with the mind occurs when we cannot distinguish between who we are and the thoughts we have. It's as if we are constantly engaged in a mental movie, losing the ability to observe thoughts from an external position. This leads to a series of emotional and psychological problems. The mind, when out of control, can use us in insidious ways. It can lead us to endless ruminations, irrational fears, and constant worries. It's like being trapped in an endless cycle of negative and self-critical thoughts. The consequence is that we feel anxious, stressed, and often unhappy. Think of someone who is always worried about the opinion of others. This person might constantly think about how others perceive her, adjusting her behavior to please or avoid criticism. This identification with the mind creates a continuous state of tension, as the person never feels truly free to be who she is. Instead, she is always shaping her identity based on others' expectations. True mental freedom begins when we realize we are much more than our thoughts. We are the consciousness that observes these thoughts. When we start to see the mind as an instrument and not as who we are, we open the door to a new dimension of being. To combat this disease, we need to cultivate the ability to observe our thoughts without identifying with them. It's a process of disidentification, where we learn to see our thoughts as transient events in the mind, not as the absolute truth about ourselves. This can be done through practices like meditation and mindfulness, where we train the mind to focus on the present moment and observe its own thought patterns. The next step is to observe how we identify with our thoughts in everyday life. When we notice a negative or critical thought, we can try asking ourselves, "Am I really this thought?" This simple question can help us take a step back and see the mind for what it truly is, a tool, not the master. Imagine sitting by a river, watching the current pass by. Leaves, branches, and perhaps even some fish pass by your vision, but you are just observing without getting involved with what you see. This is a powerful metaphor for what it means to observe our thoughts. Observing thoughts is the practice of becoming aware of what goes on in our mind without identifying with these thoughts. It's like being a spectator of our own mental flow. When we start practicing this observation, we realize we are not our thoughts. Instead, we are the consciousness that is aware of them. Let's imagine you had a tough day at work. When you get home, your mind is full of thoughts about what went wrong, how you could have done things differently, and what might happen tomorrow. Instead of getting carried away by this mental turmoil, you decide to sit in a quiet place and simply observe these thoughts. You might notice that thoughts come and go, some more persistent, others fleeting. At first, it can be hard not to get involved with them. The mind might try to pull you back into its internal drama, but with practice, you will start to notice a subtle change. You will see that thoughts are like clouds in the sky. They appear, stay for a while, and then dissipate. This practice of observation has the power to transform our relationship with the mind. When we become observers, we develop a new dimension of consciousness. This new consciousness allows us to see the mind from a different, less involved, and more compassionate perspective. Instead of being victims of our thoughts, we become their masters. Think of someone who is constantly worried about the future. Thoughts about potential problems and disasters occupy her mind. When she starts practicing thought observation, she begins to realize that these worrying thoughts are just mental projections, not realities. Over time, she learns not to identify with these worries and starts finding more peace in the present moment. Moreover, This practice can help us recognize repetitive and self-destructive thought patterns. For example, you might notice that you always criticize yourself after making a mistake. By observing this pattern, you can start working to change it, replacing self-criticism with self-compassion. Observing thoughts is a path to mental freedom. It helps us disidentify from the mind and live in a more conscious and present way. Whenever a thought arises, try to observe it without judgment. Notice its transient nature and see how you feel by just observing without getting involved. There is an enormous and profound intelligence beyond thought, something we often don't realize because we are so immersed in our minds. But what exactly is this intelligence and how can we access it? Can you imagine a famous painter known for his incredible works? He describes that when he is painting, he is not actively thinking about the next stroke or color to use. Instead, he is in a state of flow where everything seems to happen naturally. This is the intelligence beyond thought in action. This intelligence is intuitive, coming from a deeper place within us. It is the same intelligence that makes a flower bloom, guides birds in their migration, and allows a baby to learn to walk. It is not something we can force or control with the logical mind, but something that emerges when we are present and connected to the moment. The mind is a powerful tool, but it is not the only form of intelligence. Often, the most important moments in life, like experiencing the beauty of a landscape, feeling deep love for someone, or having a brilliant idea, do not come from conscious thought, but from a place beyond the mind. They are experiences that touch us deeply and connect us with something greater. Think of an athlete in a peak moment. A basketball player in the middle of an important game often enters a state where every movement and decision seems to happen effortlessly. He is not actively thinking about each step or shot, but is acting from this intuitive intelligence. This is what we call being in the zone. Another way to see this intelligence is through art and music. Composers, painters, and writers often talk about a state of inspiration where ideas flow almost effortlessly. They describe it as something coming from a place beyond rational thought, a connection with something deeper and universal. But how can we access this intelligence in our own lives? First, we need to create spaces of stillness within ourselves. When the mind is constantly active, it is difficult to hear this deeper inner voice. Practices like meditation, spending time in nature, or simply being present in the moment can help us access this intelligence. Think of a moment when you were completely present. It might have been a quiet walk in the park, listening to music, or even doing a routine activity like cooking. These moments of full presence connect us with this intelligence beyond thought. It is in these moments that we find clarity, peace, and inspiration. Try to remember a recent moment when you felt deeply connected and present. How was that experience? How can you create more of these moments in your life? The practice of presence is one of the most effective ways to cultivate this intelligence beyond thought and to reduce the dominance of the compulsive mind. But how exactly can we incorporate this practice into our daily lives? The practice of presence is, in essence, being completely present in each moment without getting lost in thoughts about the past or future. It is paying full attention to what we are doing, feeling, and experiencing now. Let's explore some practical ways to bring more presence into our daily lives. One of the simplest methods is to focus on the breath. The breath is a powerful anchor for the present moment. Whenever you notice your mind wandering, bring your attention back to your breath. Feel the air entering and leaving your lungs. This not only helps calm the mind, but also reconnects us with the now. Imagine you are washing dishes. Instead of letting your mind wander, thinking about tasks you still need to do or something that happened earlier, try to be fully present. Feel the temperature of the water, the touch of the plates, the sound of running water. Make this activity a moving meditation. You will be surprised how calming and enjoyable it can be to perform simple tasks with full attention. Another example is paying attention to the body. Our body is always in the present, and paying attention to it can help anchor us in the now. During the day, take a few moments to notice how you feel physically. Feel your feet on the ground, the posture of your spine, the sensations on your skin. This helps us get out of the mind and connect with the direct experience of the moment. Think of a daily commute like walking to work or taking a bus. Often in these moments, we are lost in thoughts or distracted by our phones. Try using these moments to practice presence. Observe your surroundings, the people, the sounds, and the smells. Be fully present in the experience of walking or commuting. Additionally, routine activities can become opportunities to practice presence. When eating, for example, try to savor each bite, pay attention to the textures and flavors, and eat slowly. This not only improves the eating experience, but also helps us be more present. Can you remember a moment when you were totally present recently? How was that experience? How did you feel? Now, try incorporating this practice into other daily activities. Choose a routine activity and make it an opportunity to practice presence. The practice of presence can completely transform the way we live. It helps reduce stress, increase life satisfaction, and access a depth of experience that we often miss. Subscribe to our channel and check out the video that is playing on the screen.